Welcome to part 2 of this audio commentary, and before I start, I would like to talk about an upcoming sequence and how it changed a little bit. Basically, a sequence involving Tajimaro, who is frustrated at Rabbit's incompetence, sorry. So anyways, hold on, it's coming. There's a sequence in which Tajimaro, who's basically pissed off at Rabbit's stubbornness, is saying, I know what you're thinking, that Rabbit's a friggin' idiot, so I'll have... Now originally, he was gonna have Jack Nicholson from The Shining lunge up towards Rabbit, shown in human form as the form of the Black Cook, unfortunately, and chop him up using rock music. But as I said, I was on a road trip with my dads when this was going on, and I showed him this scene originally, and an uncle of mine shook his head no with sadness, I think. But when I changed it to this, with Link saying, go and kill, the same uncle laughed. So this music, it replaces the original music, which was originally a score by Philip Glass from this film called Koyaanisqatsi, based on one comment who was like, Philip Glass, ugh. Well, sorry, I love Koyaanisqatsi, and I have loved it ever since I was a little kid, so honestly, big deal. And here we see the map being torn, briefly showing a very human-esque face. And you might remember last part I talked about similarities between Pooh's Grand Adventure and King Kong. Well, I mean that, especially right there, with that ravine. Doesn't it not look like that scene in both King Kongs? I'm talking about the version by Peter Jackson and the original 1933 version, in which the explorers are upon a very similar log, and King Kong comes up and just shakes them off of the log, and both of them are lying just below a very similar vast ravine. Coincidence? I think not, to quote The Incredibles here. But this is about my YouTube poop, so I like this one sequence. In a second, we will hear him switch certain words, starting there. He keeps saying, I wonder what's causing this tail to fail, so it just seemed natural of me to sort of switch up the names. And now about this sequence in which it shows Tigger literally swearing, I didn't really give that much thought to the idea of censoring all of the swears, basically only censoring whenever it was funnier. Again, going to my rule of comedy first, plot 1.5-ish. If it's funny, it works. Like this scene of Tigger jumping up and down. I honestly view it as somewhat like some jackass scribbled a bunch of crayons. Scribbled a decent work with a bunch of crayons to make it funnier. But at least we have the original version. If you don't like what I've done to this YouTube poop, you can always watch the original, which I actually like. Again, I love Pooh's Grand Adventure. You may notice that little text above it saying Zoom .45, in which it was actually part of the software of one of the plugins that I got for iMovie HD, which caused you to zoom into an image. Unfortunately, you can't get it without that godforsaken text. It's not like in Final Cut Pro, in which you can just select the square and just zoom it in, back and forth. It's one of the few things of the few flaws for iMovie HD, which is still a much better system than the current iMovie, of which I haven't had the best time adapting it to. I mean, speaking of editing softwares, often I find myself thinking of a special addition to this film in which it'll work as both of scenes of which I wasn't able to do the way I wanted. But I'll talk about that in the next episode. And one of the reasons I liked about the change I made back with Tajimaro and Rabbit is that it led away to this ending, which you will be seeing in a short while. This music is actually from Secret Garden, a sort of new age band. As a kid, I was big into new age. I mean, artists like Enya, who we will hear later on. But anyways, this is one of my favorite sequences. Originally, it was a little shorter. It didn't have that Rory Batty going, "What the fuck?" It just had him yelling "shit" twice. Basically, like this right there. But then I looked at it and decided that it needed something else. So I basically changed it into the version you see here. I think something that has to be said is that it doesn't matter. I'll talk about it a little later, but I have to talk about this joke right here, in which Rory Batty launches his Super Freeze bread, which is actually a misreading of Dr. Robotnik's line, "Have a freeze on my Super Freeze breath, not bread." And here's Tajimaro, only to be crushed by Rory Batty's Super Freeze, or Sour Puss bread. I mean, who cares in this area? It's funny. That's all. Now about what I was saying earlier. Basically, one thing that I should know through years of writing stuff, and even with my short film Alliance, which is here on YouTube, is that no matter what you are doing in anything related to visuals or even writing, as I mentioned with Tolkien earlier in the previous part, is that most of the time you will never get what you originally planned. Instead, you should be at least prepared to make at least some changes to your original concept. That's the best way I can and that's something I've noticed upon revisiting these YouTube poops. And it's something that I should have gotten into my head by the time I directed Alliance. And here's Heath Ledger's appearance as the Joker. This was shortly after The Dark Knight was released, and it just seemed so I just had to put Heath Ledger there during the Dark Knight craze. A film which is ironically also 10 years old now. And here is my sad attempt to make Pooh's tragic mental breakdown, except with Rabbit, which sadly was not as funny as Pooh before, even with this bit from Watchmen. Now about this idea of originality, originally I was gonna have either Katsumoto from The Last Samurai or the king from Disney's Cinderella pounce upon Rabbit with a sword, causing a splatter noise. Of course, he wouldn't really die here. And this scene,
This is Sparta!
I was originally gonna have Rabbit yelling, "That rabbit cannot function in this humidity!" And then cut to James D yelling, "That rabbit's tearing me apart!" I should have known about The Room, which has Tommy Wiseau ripping out that same line. And here's the Enya song called Exile, which is actually an immensely sad scene. A sad song, sorry. And here's something that I've done a lot in my YouTube poops, is to take sad scenes and sort of make them funny, in a stupid way. Like for example, here, in which I put Pooh's advice and use a bit of that famously vulgar that famously vulgar car commercial called Big Bad Bill Hells, I think. Those, I think. And honestly, while making this YouTube poop, it was moments like this and an upcoming moment I will point to later on, in which I actually started to realize how good Pooh's Grand Adventure is, and how through the process of making fun of one Disney film, it sort of led me to a newfound appreciation for Disney films in general. So that's something great that has come from this experience, because at the end of that year, 2008, I decided to put on The Lion King. This was after a long period throughout my childhood in which I formed a complete distaste of Disney films, in which I was going through a cinematic coming of age, in which I was watching the films by Kurosawa, Victoria de Saka, and all these other great films, including this one film called Whale Rider, which focuses on a young Maori girl trying to attain her right as the village chief. And there is a scene in which her grandfather, who refuses to let her be the chief, is practicing with the boys, and he does a Maori haka like BAH! I was originally planning to use it in this sequence to scare Rabbit momentarily, but since I wasn't able to find a video source of Whale Rider in time for this video, I had to substitute it for Mama Luigi, which I think works pretty well here. Ha! Look at that! He just appeared at the end. And it was this sequence where Pooh is singing mournfully for Christopher Robin in the original film, which led me to love Disney films in the films all over again. I was going through a similar experience as Pooh at the time. And so what do? Add in a stupid Pirates of the Caribbean remix song to it. Yeah. I would say it was a dumb move, but then you got this guy and the other guy looking at Pooh like, what the fuck are you doing? A classic example of what the fuck humor, which yeah. I'm sorry for not being very talkative during this review, but I want you to look very closely during this sequence, just when Piglet is waking up. As you might tell, I sort of went away towards repetition and more into being actually editing it so that it was funny. For example, watch very closely. You might have noticed, and your eyes did not deceive you. You did notice a group of naked people with Dr. Robotnik with images of Dr. Robotnik over the male's genitalia, for lack of a better term. I wanted it to be a split-second image all along. And the way Piglet held Pooh in this scenario, that's a kiss. Try not. Don't deny it. And also this sequence, in the annotations I said that this was going way too far. And honestly, I should have made it further, having a lot of characters from all other movies turning around it and reacting up to the point in which I'm abusing it. And honestly, I was about to mention a special edition of the only Pooh's Grand Adventure poop earlier, but I think I should mention it now, that basically throughout the years I've been planning a special edition in which I'd re-edit some of the scenes with improved quality and effects, as well as remaking the first two parts, partially to adapt it to my own tastes, partially to make it more epic, and also to sort of make fun of the George Lucas special editions, in which he infamously changed several things from the original, much to the displeasure of his fans. And now this scene, this brief sequence, is based on old fanfics that I made based on Pooh's Grand Adventure, in which Pooh and his friends would literally take 3 months to head to Skull. On the way, they are encountered by bionicle villains. Basically a shocker, because back then I was a big Bionicle fan. Well, we're coming to an end. See ya next time.